Welcome, friends, on the barricades. On today's special edition of our podcast, we are going to discuss the situation of the US presidential elections. We have invited Ben Burgis. He's a professor of Georgia State University. He's famous because he published a famous book, Logic for the Left, Give Them an Argument. And he's also known for being a contributor at the Jacobin magazine. Thank you for being here with us today, Ben Burgis.
Thanks, Maria.
So I'm gonna dive right in. Why is it that the Democratic Party was not able to come up with a more convincing candidate? Because we look at Biden and we say, oh, he's some sort of life-saving device. He's not really a solution, but a means that would save us from the apocalypse that is Trump. Am I correct in this assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I think there are two things, right? One is why Biden was the candidate in the first place, and then why why it was so unconvincing, but then why he looks like he's going to win anyway. So I think that he was the candidate in the first place because the Democratic Party establishment was desperate to make sure that Bernie Sanders wouldn't be the candidate. Bernie won the first three contests: Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. And that last one, he won by quite a bit. And at that point there were several centrist candidates in the race, and none of them was doing well enough, to just emerge, as the clear winner. And so Biden, because he was the centrist who'd most recently won a state in South Carolina, ended up being the one the rest of them consolidated around and dropped out to endorse. But it really, when that happened, it almost looked like the Democrats were, were sort of suicide bombing Bernie. That they were stopping him from being the nominee, but at the expense of winning the election, because because Biden seemed like at that point he seemed like exactly the kind of candidate that Trump would slaughter in the election, because he was very uninspiring, and he seemed to be undergoing, at the very least, let's say it this way, let's say it nicely, right? He's a very old man, and he seemed to be very forgetful sometimes, and not always to be sure what he was saying and what he was doing. And then Trump, is almost like Trump. If you remember back when he was first running for president, and especially in the Republican primary, Trump is almost like a stand-up comedian. He does very well with that sort of thing. And so the combination of those two, it seemed very much like Trump would win. And I still think that Trump probably would have won if not for the coronavirus, but the pandemic, and then the economic downturn that was caused, by the handling of the pandemic, being so catastrophic in the United States, that I think the last numbers that I looked at, there are 8 countries in the world with higher death rates, from COVID than the United States, and only 2 of them are really in the first world. So that's because of that, and because of the economic effects of that. I think that it looks like Biden is going to win, right? If he loses, it's going to be because of the Electoral College, which is this bizarre, anachronistic system that we have for running elections in the United States.
So it's so complicated to understand. I mean, I read and read about it, and I found it to be so complicated. And of course, I don't think that's even democratic, because I saw that you have a very small state that has the same number of senators or representatives like California, and you have all sorts of absurd things going on in our electoral system. But that aside, because that would be a
Yeah,
very complicated discussion. Um,
yeah.
well,
Yeah, I mean, the takeaway is just that it seems pretty clear at this point, unless the polls are just wrong to a shocking degree. Like it seems very clear that more people will vote for Biden, right? Whether that means he becomes president or because the peculiarities the way we do our presidential elections, he won't, right? Like there's a little bit of suspense about that. I think he probably will win, but certainly more people will vote for him.
but you had interesting candidates. You had also Elizabeth Warren. Let's not forget about Elizabeth Warren. She was a very convincing candidate, and I think she would have done great in terms of debates with Trump and in terms of her political vision. You had also Kamala Harris, okay. She's okay, and she seems pretty able to confront Trump in a direct debate. Why do you think? Because to me, it's so bizarre that they chose Biden. They had people who were not Bernie Sanders, but were
Uh,
better than Biden. Or am I mistaken here?
well, I guess there are a couple things. So I don't know. I mean, certainly politically, Elizabeth Warren, from my perspective, is better than Biden. But I think that's the problem. I think that's why they didn't want her, because uh, Elizabeth Warren politically was sort of, partway in between the Bernie Sanders sort of position and the Biden position, which was also the Pete Buttigieg position or the Kamala Harris position. Beto O'Rourke, there were a bunch of these people. Most of them are very forgettable, but Warren was sort of somewhere somewhere in between, right? And which means that people like me didn't get that excited about her, but I think she was also too like I don't think there was a scenario where the centric, like even if she had been doing better in the election, and I think part of the reason that uh, she wasn't the last, woman standing, when there was this anybody but Bernie push is just because she hadn't actually won any states at that point, right? So she couldn't really be in that position, right? So I think that's part of it, but I also think that part of it, and the reason that I think I'd be very surprised if she gets any sort of position in the Biden administration is just because even if she's not as far left as Bernie, I think she's certainly much too far left for the Democratic Party establishment and the donors, and I don't think they would trust her in that position. I think they would have been very reluctant to, even if she had been their only option, besides Bernie. I think they would have been very reluctant to take that option. I think like Biden. Biden literally told a group of donors once early in the primary that when he was president, and I quote, "Nothing fundamental will change," and I think they were only going to consolidate it that way behind somebody who they got that level of reassurance from.
Yeah, that's pure suicide in my opinion. But I have two questions here. First,
Yeah,
um, they say right now, and I think I read just moments ago on the Jacobin magazine page that probably Bernie Sanders would be Labor Secretary if Biden wins. Do you think that's a plausible thing
I,
to?
no, I don't think so. He said that he wanted that position, and that was I think that he said that basically as a bargaining strategy, as a way um, of maybe embarrassing them when they didn't give it to him, but that would be my bet. That's my best guess, right? But because I don't think he's going to get it, and I don't think he thinks he's going to get it because I don't think they would do that. I think that would I think that Biden is I mean, certainly for the election, he's obsessed with courting like moderate Republicans who might swing to vote for him, and just in general, right? I think that would be too scary for the donors. I think that would ruffle too many feathers. I think that I mean, I just said I'd be very surprised if even Elizabeth Warren has any sort of position in the Biden administration. I certainly don't believe that Bernie will. So, at least I'm on video saying that. So if it happens, you can say, all right, you were wrong about that, but I like my chances.
And the second thing, it just strikes me because you know what worries me? Now Biden will probably win, but
right.
The donors, are they just crazy? Of course, you have no way of knowing, but I assume that some of them are intelligent people and they must understand that in 4 years' time, if they don't change anything, they will end up with an even scarier version of Trump.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are, I think that's right. I think a lot of people are in denial about that. That they think of Trump as this sort of bizarre aberration from the way that the way that things are supposed to go, and that once that's corrected, then things will just be back to normal. I mean, I really think that that's the way that a lot of I think that that's the way that a lot of establishment Democrats really do think about this. But I mean, I think they're wrong. I agree with you. I mean, I think that there's already been Tom Cotton, who people may remember, he was the Republican senator who wrote the editorial in the New York Times over the summer saying that Trump should send in the troops to suppress the riots. I think he's already made some moves to indicate that he's planning to run for president in 2024. Tucker Carlson, who's an extreme right-wing xenophobic talk show host, is somebody who's been talked about a lot as a possibility. Yeah. I mean, I think that but I think you're right. I mean, like, because the things that created Trump aren't really going anywhere. Which is why I think that Biden winning, if he does, I think it's a good thing. I think it's the least bad thing that could happen right now. But but it doesn't really solve anything. It's almost like hitting the when your alarm is supposed to go off at 8 and you just hit the button so it goes off at 8:10 instead. It's just I mean, I think if nothing happens to change the situation between 2020 and 2024, 2028, then I think that we are probably going to get some Trump-like figure, maybe even worse again. But I think that I mean, really, I think the question is just because I don't think that like centrist Democrats are going to have some amazing conversion to that point of view, right? So I think the question is just what could the left do so we can so we could actually win next time, and I don't have any amazing answers up my sleeve for that, but I mean, I think that's the issue, right? Because short of some sort of left-wing breakthrough, I think just replacing Trump with like a less compelling figurehead for exactly what we had before Trump, is just going to be hitting the button on the alarm.
Yes, and you solve the problem for now, but on the long run, it may be even worse. I mean, it may complicate things. Okay, so part of the reason I think the Democratic Party was not able to understand that it has its contribution to the disaster was the thing that they placed the blame on the Russia meddling with the elections. I mean, they found an external witch that they wanted to punish for 2 years.
Right.
I think that was the national hysteria. And I think, I don't know if I'm correct in that assessment, that they missed the point because they looked outside instead of looking at what was their own contribution to the disaster that was Trump.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that I think that um, Masha Gessen, who's a Russian journalist who's actually very much a Putin critic and moved to the United States, partially because of this, right, has written some good stuff on this, where she basically says that this is the Russia obsession is a way of making it of trying to make it seem like Trump wasn't a product of things happening in America, like this is something that somebody else did to us, that this isn't that it's like the horror movie thing, the call is coming from the inside the house. So yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, like, of course, anybody who's watching this, who really followed the mind-numbing details of all of the Mueller investigation and all of this stuff, probably is like jumping up and down in their seat because they want to point out that, oh, but what about this thing that they found and that thing and the meetings in the Trump Tower and, whatever. But I think that all misses the point, right? Because not just because the sort of bigger things that were alleged didn't, there was never really any evidence that turned up for them, but also because, just taking a step back, look, was there some effort by the Russian government to influence the American election? Sure, of course. Is there some effort by the Saudi government to influence American elections? Is there some effort by the Israeli government to influence American elections? Is some effort by the Ukrainian government? Of course, right? I mean, America is the dominant imperial hegemon in the world, so everybody takes an interest in what happens in its elections. But of all the reasons that Trump won, I think that a few incompetently designed Russian Facebook ads don't make it into the top 50 list. They're not, like that. It's just not. I mean, I guess the election was so close. Maybe you take away any one factor, maybe things could have been different. But it just wasn't. It just doesn't even rank as one of the main reasons that happened. And the fact that they were so obsessed with it, the Democrats, was really a very convenient way of not having to reckon with any of the larger reasons that Trump won, right? So, like, if in states like Michigan, where I'm from, or Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, there's this sort of swing states that Trump would not have won if he hadn't won, and because of the Electoral College, and in those states, those are places where lots of people who had been auto factory workers, for example, lost their jobs, where there's been a lot of post-industrial societal decay, and things have been very, very bad. And the other explanation the Democrats want to use is that it was all about racism, right? Which, even though Hillary Clinton was a white woman, they still want to say that Trump winning was all about racism because, like, she was associated with Obama, I guess, or because of Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric, and and there was a big upsurge for that. But if you actually break down the numbers from 2016, I think that just doesn't work mathematically, because there were actually fewer white Americans who voted for Trump than who voted for Mitt Romney, who's the Republican candidate 4 years earlier. So it's not that there was some. I'm sure that you could find, like I said, there were so many things that could have gone the other way and the election would have changed. So I'm sure you can find a few thousand voters in the right places who really were excited about his anti-immigrant rhetoric. But the reason that Trump won wasn't because of Russian Facebook ads, and it wasn't even because of some upsurge of racist voters. It's because, I mean, of course, it's true that people always point to these polls that show that racial attitudes predict, whether people voted for, who people voted for better than any other issue, and that's true. But I think the same thing would have been true 4 years before, 4 years before, 4 years before. The Republican base has always had those racial, at least going back to the 1960s. But the reason that Trump won isn't because of racism. It's certainly not because of Russia. The reason that Trump won, the main reason, is just that even though fewer people voted for Trump than voted for Romney, many fewer people voted for Clinton than voted for Obama, that the drop off on the Democratic side was much bigger. And particularly it was the drop off in those crucial states was much bigger. The reason the drop off was so much bigger is because people were disillusioned, that people in cities like Detroit and Flint and Milwaukee where things have been absolutely miserable in recent decades, because of that kind of post-industrial decay. They didn't take seriously the idea that Clinton was going to do anything that was going to change things for the better. So a few of them voted for Trump, but lots of them just didn't vote. And those are people who traditionally would be Democratic voters. We could even just take white people entirely out of the equation. And if as many Black voters had voted for Hillary Clinton as had voted for Barack Obama before 4 years before, or John Kerry 4 years before that, then Hillary Clinton would be president right now. It's just sort of despair and cynicism, that in among people who would traditionally vote Democratic that made Trump president. And I guess that loops back around to earlier in the conversation, because obviously that's not going away. I mean, Biden's chances were saved by COVID, but in 4 years, it's the 4 years we should have, that should be in the past, and then the issue is going to be, again, like, are the Democrats giving people anything to vote for as opposed to voting against?
Because now what you're seeing is that Trump is losing. Okay, you don't see that the Democrats are winning.
Exactly. Yeah.
It may seem like the same thing, but it's not. And I want to ask about Alicia Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, she feels like a light in all this very bleak, political landscape that you have. Do you think she has any chance of getting even higher somewhere, or even do you think there is the slightest chance to see her as a candidate, a presidential candidate, maybe, because she's a ray of light, fresh air coming from?
Yeah, no, I mean, I love Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I don't know if she'd be a presidential candidate, but certainly, I think she's somebody who I could imagine her doing something like, maybe in the future she could challenge. So Chuck Schumer is the Democratic leader in the Senate, and he's from New York, which is her same state. So I could imagine her doing something like challenging him for that Senate seat and getting into the Senate. That's certainly something I could imagine happening. If she, if she did run for president, I'd certainly support her. I don't know if that's something she would actually do or not, but I guess the real question is, even though everything she stands for politically is what I would like and want, is just how that's communicated, and in a way that's going to be compelling to all of the different kinds of voters that you would need to actually win. And I think that Bernie Sanders was very good at that, and in a way that, like, I think Bernie Sanders was very good at pitching, at presenting his politics in a way that transcended a lot of culture war kinds of distinctions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, as far as individual politicians, right? I don't know who else would be quite as good at doing that, right? Which is a shame, because of course Bernie is so old at this point that it'd be, short of miraculous anti-aging treatments being discovered in the next 4 years, I think he's probably not going to run again. Yeah, I mean, I don't have, I wish I could wrap up on a more inspiring note there, but I just don't know, like that's part of the problem, that there isn't, there's nobody who's just obviously, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could run next time. She will just barely be old enough then, you have to be 35 to run for president, but I don't know who the left candidate would be next time, but I hope we find one, because otherwise, if it's like even if Biden does serve 2 terms, by 2028, then we're going to be in the same position we were in. We're going to be in the same position we were in 2016, and we could very well get the same result.
Yes, thank you very much for your presence at our show, and I hope the viewers find your opinions interesting, and fingers crossed that in 4 years' time we don't see a worst version of a scarier version of Trump running for president. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Maria.